Hey, everybody, welcome back to Built Faith Unfiltered. We've got a very special guest for you. We're going to dive right into this today. This is Matt Porcaro. He's joining me today. He built something called the 203K way, and his story is super interesting. He's gone from corporate America, he's now in full time real estate. And literally, he kind of started this whole thing with a 3.5% interest rate, I believe that it was, and he turned 9,500 bucks into $130,000 in liquidity. And he's going to share that story with you guys today. So without further ado, Matt, how are you today, buddy?
Bill, welcome. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Sorry about the kind of the mishap with the timing this morning, but
I'm glad we were able to make it work.
thanks for accommodating. Man, you know who Tyler Kuhn is from Savvy that owns Savvy Realty by chance in North Carolina?
No,
Well,
no.
you should, because I mean, your hair like rivals his, man. You two got
I
like
like
that
it. It's all I got.
amazing hair. It's, when you get to be my age, you just try to keep it from turning gray. But
I say it before, it's all I got. Someone said it one time. I think when we got our engagement photos, me and my wife, we walked into the marriage photo place after, and they were like, they were looking through our files. They were like, "Oh, you're the hair guy." And I'm like, "Oh no, now I got to keep up with it." So you either see me and my hair is either done or I have a hat. Anything in between, it's like if I don't have it done, people will be like, "Are you sick? Is something wrong with you? Are you okay? Like, are you feeling okay?" So it became like a staple. And no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
that's awesome. So let's dive right in. Tell me about this, the 203K way, the 203,000. I mean, I read in your bio, and this is the first time you and I meeting, just so everybody knows. I'm learning right along with everybody that's listening and watching on YouTube. So you turned $9,500 down payment into $130,000 in liquidity. How did you do that? And I assume that was the impetus to start this program, correct?
Yeah, that was the 203K way, as I call it. The 203K is a program, actually. It's not actually not 203,000. Although I made close to that in equity very quickly on that first deal I did. The 203K is it's an FHA loan program that nobody talks about. It is real estate's best kept secret. It was kept away from me for years. And the only reason that I found it was because I grew up in Long Island in New York and started working, did the whole like corporate America thing, went to school, got a good job, everything that everyone was telling me to do, and very quickly realized that I didn't like it. And I didn't think that this is how people got rich either by any means. My parents really struggled a lot financially growing up. So they always spend it, but they had their own business. And their kind of idea was that, like, hey, go work for someone else, have a consistent paycheck, have benefits, all that stuff. That's how you become wealthy. That's how you make money. That's how,
That's the
like,
safe route that we want all our kids
that's
to
the
go that
safe
way,
route
right?
that we want our, yeah. And you don't fault it for them. They didn't know anything about investing. They didn't know anything about like any really, they had no keys to the kingdom either, right? So I did that. Got into the workforce very quickly. Worked as an engineer in New York City for a number of years. But as I was doing it, I was realizing like this isn't it either, right? It was like no matter how hard I worked, I'd still make the same paycheck as the guy next to me, and like I didn't love the idea of like the commute was terrible. I didn't like I got like 10 days of vacation a year. It just didn't feel right to me either. So I started digging in and trying to realize like how
I
do
don't mean to
people do
interrupt
it?
you, Matt, but can you
Yeah.
fucking imagine going back today and like going to 10 days a year on vacation?
No. And the irony of it is, and you know this as a business owner, is that like I might take less vacation now than I probably did prior, but the difference is that I had breakfast with my kids this morning, right? I picked them up from school when they need to be picked up from school. My wife said, "Hey, can you bring them later for going?" I have the freedom to make my own schedule and do what I want. And that's ultimately what I was looking for, right?
How long was your commute to get from Massapequa into the city? Like, what time were you leaving in the morning? Like 6:30?
An hour and 30 minutes low end both ways. So total of over 3 hours a day.
Were you training or driving?
No, I was taking the train, which is
Yeah,
its
I
own
think
hell.
people that like I grew up in Southern California, right? And people that haven't like grown up battling New York into the city, out of the city, Washington, DC, Philly, Los Angeles, they don't understand how that really impacts your life. I remember moving from Bakersfield, California, which is the armpit, to go to UCLA. And my first practice, I was there on a golf scholarship. We had to drive from UCLA basically to the Rose Bowl to this place that should be if you go at midnight, it's like 30 minutes. But you go after class, it's fucking 2 hours there and 2.5 hours
Yeah.
back.
New York, yeah.
And people don't understand how that eats away at your life and your family and your kids.
The commute alone may have been one of the catalysts for wanting me to get into investing and real estate and everything like that. Yeah, as you understand, right? A lot of people don't have that, but they don't understand why a lot of these higher cost of living areas, that was the only way you can do it, right? Because you can't afford to live in New York City, right? I certainly couldn't. So I rented there briefly, but the rent was crazy out of control. I couldn't own there. So I lived in the suburbs. Anyway, I just didn't think there was any way that I could buy a house. I worked a decent job. I thought I was making okay money. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses. And I was realizing, like, even with what I'm doing, I was told I'm doing all the things right, all the things that my high school teachers told me to do and my college professors told me to do. And here I am, and I don't feel like I can even afford a home, let alone multiple homes. So, through a lot of digging and a lot of researching and a lot of just like really pig-headed determination and trying and failing a lot of different real estate strategies as well. Like, I tried the things, I tried the wholesaling, I tried to like figure out how to flip houses with no money, which I don't know, gurus talk about that. I guess maybe there's some people out there, maybe they're much savvier and smarter than me or whatever, that they manage to get people to give them hundreds of thousands of dollars of their money with no experience. I wasn't able to do that. So in either case, in my situation, I couldn't make it work. So lo and behold, I did a ton of research and I found out I was in a local group and I found out from someone in the group about this product. And the thing about it, what was so crazy was the lady that told me about it. She's like, "Hey, listen, being that you don't own a house yet, and this is the big caveat with this, is you have something that's really, really, really powerful as a beginner, which is owner occupancy and the ability to buy your first deal. You actually can take advantage of these really low down payment, really favorable government-backed programs that enable you to basically leverage the fact that you're new and use that as a benefit rather than a downside. Instead of being really savvy and having to use all this big, heavy investor capital or hard money capital, you can use government backed capital and use that to get basically your first deal. So she told me about this program. It's called the FHA 203K loan. And essentially what it allows you to do is it gives you all the money to buy a house and all the money needed to renovate the house to whatever, degree you need to. And it allows you to buy up to a 4-unit property with that. So basically, I combined two different things. I bought a duplex property. It was a crack house duplex, literally. I mean, it was disgusting. They were selling drugs out of the front of it. It was almost condemned, but it was the only thing that I could afford here in New York. But it's a legal 2-family. And it gave me the money to purchase it. And then it gave me the $80,000 that I needed to completely renovate it. So I was all into the property. I purchased it. It was a foreclosure deal, REO. I picked it up for $270,000. Put $80,000 into it and was all in for $350,000. Now, I used the bank's money to do the renovation. I only put $9,500 down, which was all I needed. The 3.5%. Plus, I wrapped in all the closing costs. The sellers gave me a full seller concession. I built that into the deal. I was able to wrap in all the closing costs into the deal. So that's all I had out of pocket. In turn, 8 months later, after we finished the renovation, I built $130,000 of equity immediately. And not to mention, I was able to live in one unit and rent out the other unit. So I basically was paying close to nothing for my mortgage every month. And then very soon after, took that deal, leveraged the equity that I had built with other hard money and private money sources, and got into the flipping game. But ultimately, that was the thing that gave me someone that didn't have a lot of savings, didn't really have anything, no experience, no nothing. Gave me I call it the 203K way because it gave me the springboard into real estate investing in a market where there was no way I was going to be able to put 20 or 30% down on an investor loan. There was no way I was going to be able to afford a mortgage on my own. I needed to be able to buy a duplex and be able to get that tenant income from that other unit enabled to be able to qualify. So it was a culmination of all the things that I needed as someone that was just starting out. It gave me all the tools and all the leverage to get myself into a really tough game in a really tough market.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a lot of equity to build and, reposition. When you say that you leveraged it, did you cash out refi the property? Did you sell it? What did you do with the reposition?
That's a really good question. So, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but it brings on a really important lesson that I learned when I did this. So essentially what happened was I did it. So with these low down payment FHA loans specifically, they have something called mortgage insurance, right? I'm sure you're familiar, but for everyone that's not, mortgage insurance is basically like the little extra money you pay every month.
The PMI.
Yeah, in exchange for being able to like be part of this low down payment club, right? Because if you put down less than 20%, you're considered a subprime borrower.
Right.
So the government insures these loans. The government doesn't give you the loans, they insure them, right? And in order for them to have this insurance program, you have to pay that insurance program. It works like insurance does. So it is a couple extra $100 a month. So the way you get out of that, in addition to a lot of, lowering your rate and everything like that, is refinancing. So I refinanced immediately into conventional. I got rid of that couple $100 a month. And in addition to getting a slightly better rate, because the rates were slightly better at the time, I did not pull money out of the property because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. What I did do though was I took out a home equity line of credit on it, but I did it after I had already moved out. And a lesson I learned was that you don't do that after you move out. Do it while you're still there, because banks, the kind of lesson with the 203K and this owner occupancy thing and all this stuff is like banks will lend you the most favorable terms when it's your primary residence. A lot of people ask me, can you do this if it's not your primary? No. The reason it's your primary, the bank knows that it's really stable. They know that you're living there. So they're going to give you the absolute best terms. They know that if you will live in that property, you're going to do everything within your power to make sure that that payment gets made and you keep it up to snuff and you do the repairs on it, stuff like that. That gives you the highest chance. Same thing with home equity lines of credit. If they know that you live there, they're going to give you the best. I ended up doing that after I moved out and I didn't get as nearly as good a loan to value on it. But that home equity line of credit is what helped me. It basically gave me, again, I went from having literally $10,000 to my name to having over $100,000 of access. And as you can imagine, gave me a lot more ability to go flip and just gave me a lot more flexibility on my financing going forward.
That's awesome. How many times can you do the FHA, the 203K? I mean, if you were to sell that property, could you do it again, or do you only get that opportunity one time?
Yeah, so great question. So typically you're only allowed to have one FHA 203K or any FHA for that matter on your name at any given time. Now, there's stipulations with it. If you're moving for work or something and you're keeping the previous home, if you're over 100 miles, you could do that. Or if you sell it and you move on to another one. Obviously, I'm a big fan of buy and hold. I don't think I flipped a lot. My only regret with flipping was not holding a bunch of those flips now in retrospect. But
But if you reposition into a conventional, then you could do another FHA.
exactly, but a couple of crazy things changed in the last year, especially with owner occupant financing like these loans. So FHA previously was the only program, the only low down payment program, especially on the renovation side, that allowed you to buy up to a 4 unit property with only 3.5% down. Fannie Mae entered the mix because they realized that a lot less people were buying houses. So they're trying to make it more favorable for everyone. So Fannie Mae entered, which is the conventional product, basically. They entered the mix and they have a Fannie Mae home style loan. That's actually what I'm doing on my own forever home right now. So I practice what I preach. Like I'm doing it again. The Fannie Mae home style, that's a conventional product that's 3% down or 5% down if it's not your first property ever. And you're able to do that. And you can buy up to a 4 unit with this for only 5% down, and you could repeat it up to 11 times. Now, obviously, you do it year after year. The previous properties have to cover their own thing. The whole only stipulation is that you have it be your primary residence for at least a year. So in my case, I had the earnest, I went into it knowing that I was going to be there for some time, but I knew I was going to make it a rental eventually. So I held it, then went on to do it again. And then now I'm doing it with my primary house in addition to the flipping business and the buy and hold business that I had.
So I think for everybody that's listening out there, what's really interesting to me is, I'm in the short-term rental space, right? And I've done commercial, I've done flips, all that type of stuff. I think you went from kind of hacking, if you will, because I think you lived in one of
Yep.
those
House
units,
hacking.
right?
Yep.
Doing some house hacking, and then he pulls a HELOC out for, the equity, the 190 or whatever it was, and then you immediately put that into flips. So for those of you that are listening and you really understand what I'm talking about, like my friend Jerry Norton, Flipping Master, he talks about fast money, medium money, slow money. Matt went from slow money to get the deal done, but that was really fast money with the equity you were able to pull out, and
Bingo.
then rolls it into flips to continue to build your bankroll, I assume, correct?
Exactly.
So what is the mix of Matt's portfolio look like today? I mean, how much is buy and hold, LTR, MTR, STR versus flipping?
Yeah, so I'm super boring, man. I built my whole portfolio or lack thereof using these rentals. I have 3 doors that perform very, very well because my out of pocket was so low, and I flipped heavily after that. So like I said earlier, my only regret is that I didn't hold more of those properties, right? I was focusing on flipping, I was focusing on renovation, and now I'm renovating my forever home right now, which is a big equity play as well. I mean, it is my forever home, but using the same process, we're building almost close to a $500,000 of equity on this deal, right? So I always went for the value add stuff. I do all long-term rentals. I don't do much with short-term or midterm or anything like that. The ones that I have, but the ones that I have, they perform really well, right? And the whole idea for me was that I wanted to always do value like burst strategy, but really build the equity side as much as possible. Because I realized after doing this for a little while, I realized that cash flow is awesome, but the thing that really helps you is the appreciation, the tax benefits, and the equity. I didn't realize that I become more bankable. People pay more attention to me, banks pay more attention to me. I get better rates on things on my savings accounts, all kinds of stuff because they see how much equity and how much net worth I'm sitting on, right? So, it's funny in like as you go through the process, you realize certain things and when again, like the flipping thing I learned like flipping, I wish I held more of those. Like I made the quick $50,000, $80,000 pops, which are great. But what happened with that, right? I got caught up in that and I just parlayed it into another bigger flip that put me more, out of capital and I look back on it and listen, I have some stuff to show for it, but the idea here is like if I just knew that going back. But the big takeaway for me is that I have more access to capital than ever and more access to equity than ever. And I'm glad that when I did do what I did, I only did the burst strategy effectively with these loan products and house hacked my way to get there, meaning I only had to put very little down every time I did it.
Right. It's kind of interesting. I mean, you talk about a couple of things I want to unpack real quick, and the flipping and holding. I'm trying to push a lot of people that are in the short-term rental space into flipping, just because one of the big problems for us are whether you're buying long any type of real estate, long-term, short-term, midterm, we end up running out of cash, right? And we end up being cash poor, and especially when you're in that slow lane. I look back and I was thinking about this. I was in Montana last week hosting one of my mastermind groups at one of my properties, and there when they were asking about flipping, I'm like, well, I flipped 17 homes in 21 and 22 in one market just in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and I made 3.3 million bucks off of those 17 homes. It was awesome, and it was an impetus to buy more real estate. But I went back and I had my agent down there just for shits and giggles. I said, hey, can you get me the
Oh,
market
don't I did that
value for those
recently.
17 homes? And that 3.3 million in cash, I leveraged into about almost $8 million in additional equity, but I would have had just over $9 million if I still held on to them.
I did the exact same thing you did, Bill. I did the exact same thing, and that's why I say, like, I did that in 22, and I looked back, and I just looked at I even had some like, I have one, for example, I had this tiny little bungalow that I sold that I flipped. It was like $300,000. Sold it to the nicest couple in the world. I'll never forget that closing. They were so emotional. It was such a great it was nice. Fast forward, they made way more money on that house than I did for sure. They sold it I don't know, 2 years. They lived in it for 2, 3 years. And that thing they sold for 450. They made $150,000 on it, free and clear, right? And it's like, I'm like, man, oh man. So, it's just to your point, right? The flipping, there always has to be an active income side of things. And I'm glad you brought that point up. If you don't mind, like, I just want to bring up one other thing because as I'm maturing into the game, right, I'm probably coming up on a decade of doing this. And what I'm realizing is that we do this to get passive income, right? And whatever you want to call passive is a relative term, right? I think really what we're looking for is freedom with our time and how we do it. And we have our own businesses and multiple income streams, right? We're not up against like when I was working in corporate. I remember I was working a job. We were working for a really high value client, and literally that we lost the contract for no reason of anything that anyone was doing. It was just a number on a spreadsheet, and we were gone overnight. I didn't have any income. I had no money coming in. So what we really look for is is income streams and stuff like that. But with the real estate side of things, you always need to have, what I'm learning is you always need to have an active income. Something's active. Like there's no such thing as fully passive. I mean, there is, but like there has to be an active thing, right? In the STR world, I have a lot of buddies that work in STR, but they also have property management companies. I have another friend that just started an STR specific pool company. So they do like the pools for all the STRs because they know how that manages, right? So it's like always having, in addition to your capital that you need for all these properties and stuff like that, flipping again is an active one, but you don't realize if you're not careful with flipping, you could get caught up in the hamster wheel of making all that money too, you know?
You better understand the taxes. I mean, the thing that I really like about your 203K plan is that for newbies specifically, right? But also, depending on your family situation, I mean, so FHA requires that you live in the home as a primary for a year, right? So go buy a duplex, go buy a triplex, a quadplex, whatever, live in the house, but spend one extra year in that house so you qualify for the 2 out of 5, and then you're paying, you can profit up to $500,000 in cash, tax free.
Yeah,
If
right.
you
If you
if
want to
you do
sell
the
it.
2 out of 5,
Right.
right?
Yep. Exactly.
And I think a lot of people don't understand how to stack the different programs and benefits. If they had, like, I couldn't do that. I mean, I've got kids and that type of stuff. My wife wouldn't have any of that. She'd like, go figure out a way to make another 500,000 bucks some other way. But for certain people, there's ways to do it. Let me ask you a question if you don't mind, and you don't have to answer this, but
Sure.
so you only own 3 properties, right?
Mhm.
And you're renovating your primary right now. How much money are you making off of your real estate? Because I think people look at me, I've got a $22 million short-term rental portfolio. I can't achieve that, but you're the real guy that left corporate America like I was 15 years ago, right? And you're doing that right now. Are you able to live just off of that?
Off of just cash flow, no. I would say, and that's the thing going back to the whole cash flow thing is like, even if I could, I wouldn't, just because again, I'm in growth mode. I'm in the growth phase of my life and I'm always looking for additional things, right?
Then how are you growing? What's generating your cash? Still flipping?
Yeah, so I have that. I have my whole community. I have the whole lending and mortgage arm. I'm basically a subject matter expert in this whole field now, right? So that's a big portion of this for me is in addition
So
to
that's
that,
like your
right?
203K coaching program that they can find at 203 the 203kway.com, correct?
Yep, exactly. So I have that. That's something that really is a hobby for me. Like enjoy doing that. Obviously, it's another income stream for me, and it's great. But it's the most rewarding thing I do because it's just awesome to help people out and see how it brings them into that world, and did what it did for me for them. So I have that. I have a lead gen side of the business as well, and then I also have the construction arm and stuff like that. So I dip my toe in a lot of different things. I've always kind of been the person that has way more on my plate than I should. But what I will say is that the real estate and the consistency of having the income that we get from these properties, right? Because the income we get from these properties total, you're looking at like $6,000 a month, right? Free and clear, right? After all the expenses, after the write-offs, everything like that. So you have that as like a very easy nest egg that like isn't completely hands off, but hands off enough where I don't have to. I could know that that's always just ticking in the background, right? In addition to some other more maybe less consistent, but like maybe higher ticket in a lot of senses too.
I
Bigger months like
That's
that
awesome.
type
So
of
you
thing.
got your hands in a lot of pots. I wanna give you the last question for today. What is your forecast? What is your vision? How do you think the real estate market's gonna be affected? We have former President Trump, soon to be President Trump again coming back in. I am a non-political guy, but the positioning that he's already put into place for us as real estate investors and the tax plans look to be pretty aggressive to come back and benefit us as we move into 2025. So I'd love to get kind of your take on how 2025 will look different than 22, 23, 24.
So right off the bat, different than 24 is that there was just a lot of uncertainty, right? Uncertainty on who's going to become who's next in line. The market's all over the place. There was just a ton of uncertainty. So good, bad, or indifferent. I think the good thing of like the fact of like the election being over, so to speak, is that you don't have that market of that kind of uncertain, the people that were watching the news and getting caught up in the news cycle on whether because here's just like you, I'm very like apolitical in the sense of like I don't care who's in the White House. It could be Ronald McDonald. I don't care. It's not going to change my strategy, right? I'm always going to look for discounted real estate. I'm always going to look for value add opportunity. That's always what I'm going to pursue. So going into 2025, though, I think in the very least, we have a removal of some of that uncertainty, whether you care about who's in the White House or not, who's going to be there. So because of that, you have a little bit more of a stronger market. We're seeing the stock market and the markets and the crypto market and everything being obviously very excited about what's to come. However, we never have a crystal ball and we don't really know for sure. What I would say with 2025 is there's been a lot of stagnation in the real estate side of things. There's been a lot of kind of misunderstanding on like where the direction's going. Rates are all over the place. The Fed, even though they're doing rate drops, aren't affecting mortgage rates really as much as people would hope and like. I think what we are going to see a ton of is the accessory dwelling units. A lot of what the federal government is pushing right now in terms from a home ownership perspective is they really, really are pushing. They're really pushing the accessory unit thing, the ADUs, all basically the basically blanket rezoning of single family homes into allowing them to have accessory income producing units across the board. California's been doing it for years, but it's happening here in New York. Everyone said it wouldn't happen. It's happening. It's happening in every corner of the United States. All of the federal loan programs are all including this now. So now they'll forecast the income of those accessory units. It doesn't even have to be like a duplex or a triplex. It could just be like a mother-in-law suite nestled somewhere in your home. If it is something that can house a person safely, they will forecast the income from that to help you get approved for hire. So these have been around for a while, but I think they don't. The bulk of what I'm trying to say is that nobody has a housing solution yet. We're still short whatever the number is. It's a lot of numbers gets thrown around, 5 million, 7 million, whatever. We're short a lot of residences and a lot of homes. So at the end of the day, this is the government's knee-jerk reaction, good, bad, or indifferent, to trying to get more people to get more housing availability. And I think that housing, this for millennials, this is going to be probably, and Gen Z and everything, thereafter, this is going to be one of the new ways. If you want to be a homeowner and you want to be able to make it affordable, especially in high cost of living areas, this is going to be the way to leverage yourself into home ownership and all the benefits of it, and ultimately become a real estate investor at the same time while providing affordable housing for people that really need it.
I love it. Thanks for the outlook and thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. You're amazing. And everybody at home, make sure you check out the 203K Way on Instagram or the 203kway.com so you can hook up with Matt. This is definitely a product that you should have in your toolkit. Thanks again, Matt, for joining me. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening to Bill Faith Unfiltered, whether it's on my podcast, on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, everywhere, or if you're on YouTube, make sure you smash that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.